Good afternoon. Welcome to this webinar about balcony solar and lessons for Northern Virginia. I'm Dale Medeiros, and I work as a Senior Regional Planner for the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, the NVRC. We're a regional council of governments representing the 13 counties, cities, and towns, and the 2.6 million people of Northern Virginia. And for decades, Northern Virginia Regional Commission has prioritized the search and application of policy and technical innovations from countries like Germany to Northern Virginia. And today we plan to focus on the exceptional revolution taking place in Germany surrounding balcony solar, or plug-in solar, as it's commonly referred to here. Here's the context: across the United States, electricity prices are steadily rising, driven by, among other variables, the rapid growth of data centers and the need to meet applications for artificial intelligence. But with the elimination of federal tax credits and other incentives that had previously supported renewables for solar photovoltaic, it's estimated that about 70% of households in the United States cannot now access or support rooftop solar. These include other variables like upfront capital costs, roof constraints, or rental status. Across the Atlantic, places like Esslingen, Germany, they've been experimenting successfully with balcony solar. Balcony solar relies on solar photovoltaic panels that convert sunlight directly into electricity. The single panels, sometimes or usually between 400 and 800 watts, have built-in inverters and can be hung on balconies or mounted on porches or driveways. They can be purchased on Amazon or other retailers. And the last I read, about 4 million of these balcony solar systems had been bought and applied in Germany. And the appeal is growing in the United States. Last year, the state of Utah became the first state in the United States to allow their application. And if I'm not mistaken, I think I read this morning it's something like 14 states, including Virginia, have legislation modeled after that which has been passed in Utah. And this is relevant for our webinar today because in Northern Virginia, we have a strong record and support for solar energy, particularly solar PV. We have huge energy affordability and demand issues. And so now we'd love to listen to Magnus talk about his work in Stuttgart. Magnus works as a project manager, overseeing photovoltaic systems at the Regional Climate Protection Agency, the Klimaschutzagentur in Esslingen. He's been doing that since 2023. In that role, he helps local municipalities, companies, and private households transition towards renewable energies. By training, Magnus is an industrial engineer. He studied in Hamburg, also in Copenhagen, and Cambridge, United Kingdom. He holds a PhD from Aalborg University in Denmark. He has accumulated over 10 years of experience in research and implementation of strategies for resource preservation and climate protection in different industries, including the automobile industry, medical technology, and most recently, renewable energy. Magnus is also the proud father of 2 people and lives in Esslingen. Before I turn things over to Magnus, just a few housekeeping rules. He'll deliver a PowerPoint presentation. And if you have any questions, park them in the Q&A. We want to make this as interactive as possible. And if you would like to speak and raise a question directly with Magnus, please just raise your hand and I'll turn the mute off button. And then just one final shout out to Bob Lazaro, who has his birthday today. Happy birthday, Bob, our former executive director and solar pioneer of our region without any equivalent. Magnus, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dale. Thank you for the invitation and good afternoon also from my side. It's a real pleasure to be here and share with you some insights on balcony solar here in Germany. And I think, Dale, if you could go to the... Yes, perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so, and yes, greetings from Esslingen. If you can go back one slide, maybe just to... Yes, exactly. So this is the place from which I am today speaking to you. This is the beautiful town Esslingen. I understand that there's a real partnership and friendship between Northern Virginia and the region of Stuttgart. So I assume perhaps 1 or 2 of you have already seen Esslingen. It's quite an old and beautiful city. It's actually next year celebrating its 1250th birthday. And yeah, so maybe as a little, let's say, bit of a foreshadowing, of course, the fact that we have this beautiful town is on the one hand a real blessing, but on the other hand, as a photovoltaic expert, it can also be a bit of a curse. And what I mean by that, I will come back to by the end of my presentation. Okay, so that's me. I think most of this has already been said by Dale. Thank you for the introduction. I think that we can just move on. So, uh, as I already mentioned, I am a project manager photovoltaic at the Klimaschutzagentur. So this is a municipal energy agency here in the district of Esslingen, close to Stuttgart. We are 10 employees and some external energy consultants here. And the goal of this municipal energy agency is to provide free, neutral, and qualified initial information on climate protection, energy, and also climate adaptation for basically anyone in our in our district here. We focus in our work on the 44 cities and municipalities here in the district. So we help them to build solar or plan solar systems on administration buildings, schools, all kinds of municipal buildings. But we are also the first point of contact for all the 500,000 inhabitants here, private households. And we also have some offerings, consultancy we provide to local companies and other organizations. And so this whole agency is funded by the country state of Baden-Württemberg, the local member municipalities, and also we do some commercial project-based consultancy. And so you might wonder, so is it a normal thing for any district in Germany to have its own energy agency? And the general answer would be no. But Dale, if you would go to the next slide, please. Actually, in Baden-Württemberg, it is quite common. And as you can see here on this map, so this is the map of Baden-Württemberg and a list of all the municipal or regional energy agencies that we have here. And as you can tell, most districts in Baden-Württemberg really have their own energy agency. Sometimes it's 5 employees, some of them have 30 employees, but they really provide a lot of momentum to this whole energy transition going on here in our country state. And specifically for the field of photovoltaic, there's an own network, which is what you can see here on the top right corner, the Photovoltaic Network Baden-Württemberg. And this is basically every energy agency sending at least one person to this network that works full-time, just like me, on photovoltaics. And really in this network, we exchange a lot of information and experiences. And I can confidently say that with this network behind me, I am basically able to answer any question on photovoltaic that you can come up with within a couple of days. So it's a very valuable resource, and I think really worthwhile studying or replicating in other parts of the world. Maybe this is my first takeaway message above it all. Yes. Okay, if we want to move on. So I've tried to formulate 3 overall key takeaways for you that I want to basically send over the Atlantic to you. I have tried to keep them as general not general, but let's say, more general as possible, so that because I think these points also touch upon some of the public discussions we've had over the years here in Germany on the topic of balcony solar. But I think they also, I hope, will answer your burning questions. So I will firstly start by explaining why balcony solar is so much more than 1%, and I will explain also what that 1% refers to in a second. In the second part, I will give a bit of an insight into the policy design and why simplification is really the key for making balcony solar a widespread a thing. And then in the end, I intentionally wrote it in smaller letters here. So the devil is in the details. I don't want to end on a critical note, but over the years, I've also seen um, some aspects where even though we simplify this process as much as possible, still some hiccups, or how you say, like some problems occur in practice. And I think these are manageable, but I just want to uh, yeah, tell you in advance so you can perhaps prepare for those questions. Okay, so then let's get started um, on balcony solar and why is one more than 1%. If you can go to the next slide. So first of all, when we hear the term balcony solar, we of course the first image that comes to mind is these what you can see here on the left. This is typical multi-tenant housing in which usually people live who don't own the place, right? They don't own the roof they live under. And here then balcony solar is basically their way of installing PV modules and harvesting the sun and producing clean energy. And this is of course also the main, let's say, audience that we want to address with this technology. However, the term balcony solar is in fact a little bit misleading because this whole thing is not so much about the balconies, but it's really about the plugs. And the plugs, meaning that these PV systems, they are so easy to install, basically like using a toaster, right? You go to the supermarket or to a retailer, buy one, you go home, plug it in, and then you're ready to go. And this is actually the right or the most important characteristic, right, of this technology, which is why I would always be more in favor of using the term plug-in photovoltaic, and I've seen it also, this abbreviation. And I really want to say that all those images here that you can see on the right side, those are taken here from our region. Some people put these panels on their garden shed. Some put them on their garage rooftops. Some even put it, as you can see on the top right corner, on their fences. Although from an aesthetic perspective, I think this one is a bit questionable, but who am I to judge, right? And perhaps on the bottom right corner, this is an example that is actually a picture taken here at our terrace of our offices here. We've built this solar table ourselves, and this is usually where it's on our terrace, and this is where we have lunch every day in summer. So this table produces energy when we don't eat, and of course it needs to take a break while we're eating, but then it produces energy. So this is also these systems just come in all types and forms. If you can move on to the next slide, please. Yeah. So, and as you've probably also heard, these plug-in solar systems have experienced quite a growth over the last years here in Germany. It's a real success story. And on the left corner here, you can see the amount of installed power from plug-in PV in Germany, which has experienced like a real growth, mainly starting in 2022, which was of course also related to the war in Ukraine and growing or rising energy prices. But still, so we are now actually last year in 2025. We have passed let's say the magical threshold of 1 million officially registered systems in Germany. I think we should be above 1.2 million by now. Alone in 2025, 500,000 new balcony solar or plug-in solar systems have been installed. And there was also an unreported or a study already in 2024 that estimated the unreported figures to be way above 2.5 million. So I think it's fair to assume that by now we are probably above 4 million systems being in use. And perhaps the most important message to everyone so far there are no reports of any damages, fires, or injuries directly related to plug-in solar systems. So it's also a really safe technology to use. So if we move on, please. Yes. So here I'm now I'm getting to the 1% that I mentioned earlier. So from a systems perspective, this graph shows the overall installed base of photovoltaic power in Germany, and you can see from the darker green graph that the main part has been rooftop solar, and then on the top, the light green color, also the growing relevance of solar parks, right? And then now down there on the in light red, you see this is the share of plug-in solar of this installed base. And in 2025, I'm sorry, in the headline, it's supposed to say 2025, but plug-in solar accounted for around 3 to 4% of the newly installed photovoltaic power in Germany, which in total accounts for approximately 1% of the installed base. So, critics might say, well, this is nice and neat, but for the overall energy transition, this is rather a minor contribution. And looking at this graph, I understand that you might come to this conclusion. However, and if you could go to the next slide, Dale, I think if we look at it from an individual's perspective, this image really changes a lot, because what you get as an individual is not only actual cost savings and independence from electricity prices, but what you also get is self-efficacy for climate protection and some sort of empowerment of the individuals in this energy debate, which I think should not be underestimated. If we look at the economics, a plug-in PV system in Germany can be acquired at around $400, which includes shipment already. And then you, of course, need some fastening to fix it safely, of course, on your balcony or wherever you want to use it. And the important thing is that on top of that, you do not need a professional technician for the installation or the electrical connection. This is intentionally brought by the regulation because you really want to reduce the barriers for acquiring these systems as much as possible. And I will also get to that in a second, in the second part of the presentation. So mainly you can get these systems for around $500. And in return, what you get is around energy cost savings of around $150 per year, depending, of course, on electricity prices. But it's fair to assume that the plug-in solar has a return financial break even after 3 to 4 years. So it's also a really safe investment. And of course, the social aspect. So given these rather affordable prices, it's really a way to participate for everyone in this energy transition, especially the tenants. And then the last part, from a point of view of education, I think these offer a really intuitive and easy way, an easy entry point for individuals to really gain an understanding of energy production and consumption. Because once you start to understand how much, or you have an interest in these plug-in solar systems, you might want to study your electricity bill. You want to see, when am I using how much electricity? Which are my main electricity consuming devices? Then you might go online and you would find something that you can see here on the right, which is an online simulator that really helps you to understand how much does the energy production of my system change depending on the orientation, south, north, east, west. And you can also calculate how much money you save. So you learn a lot about electricity by engaging in this technology, which I think is also an empowering aspect. Okay, so that was my first point. I think despite the minor contribution of this technology and the bigger picture, I think for the individual, it's really such an important thing to do. Then let's dive into the policy design, and I really want to say at this point that I am not myself a policy advisor, so I've been following this debate, of course, closely, but those are more my observations from practice, right? From working with individuals that are buying plug-in solar systems, and I can really want to share what has made this work for them, and what was so what are the crucial points here. If we can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is a slide that has a lot of information, so let's take it step by step. So what I've tried to map out for you here is the process of how plug-in solar has been introduced in German legislation. And this is not a sophisticated list of all the laws and regulations that have been passed, but more spotlights. But I think I want to convey two main messages. So on the top, on top of the line, you see in green the regulation on the topic that has been done via the renewable energy laws, which is called EEG in Germany. And on the bottom line, you have the technical standard that, so to say, enables this technology specifically by the Association of the German Electrical Engineers. So, and what I think is important to know is that already the very early renewable energy laws in the 2000s, they didn't mention or define a plug-in solar per se, so not explicitly. However, it was a basis for operating these systems already back then. So this was never not allowed, which is very important to know because it means that it was always legal to buy and operate plug-in solar in Germany already for the last 20 years, basically, or 25 years. And this is really important because then, you know, in 2010 we had a solar boom, the first wave of PV installations here in Germany, and with that, of course, also growing interest in these plug-in solars, and which then led to in 2013 to the initiation of this process for defining the legal standards, right, the technical standards. So basically, the systems were already there; they were already in use. And there were a lot of people saying, well, this works. We can see that it works. We have demonstrators. So let's start writing it down and putting it down on paper and defining these standards. But then it took another, at least 5 years for plug-in solar to be actually mentioned in the first technical standard. And so I think here, this in 2018 or in the end of 2018, the VDE they published the first technical standards, which then went into effect in 2019. And by that time, already thousands or almost 100,000 of these systems were already being in use, right? So the standard definition basically was lagging behind what you can see out there in the real world. And still, then in 2018 or in 2019, as you can see here, the official recommendation was that these systems can only be operated until a maximum power of 600 watts, and that you would need this special electric plug. We call it VLAN plug. And for that one, you would need always an electrician to install this. So this is not a self-service plug-and-play solution, but you would need to have it installed professionally. And so that was the standard from 2018, 2019 onwards, and it remained that way until just last year in December, when the full product standard was published, which then officially also technically acknowledged the 800 watts maximum power, and also then as you can see here on the top of the line, that the regular plug for all electric devices that we use here in Germany can be used also for plug-in solar. And again, by that time, almost you remember the graph before, right? Hundreds of thousands systems had already been installed and were in use, and most of them were using the standard plug, you know. And I think this is an important lesson or learned. I think that practitioners or civil society were really ahead of the official standard definition, and that that was really important for the for advancing this topic, and for also bringing forward that technical standards also reflect what you can really observe in practice, right? It's not a theoretical discussion. We have trained it, we've observed it and studied it for a long time, and then translated that into a full product standard, which is, I think, a great achievement. So I really invite you to learn from this really long process and take over most of what we have written down on paper last year, right? Okay, that was a long story, but now I think if we can move on to the next slide. So I think, and this is probably my most important slide, and it again has a lot of things. So these are really, I think, the main policy instruments that we have used here in Germany to make this as easy as possible. So, and if we just read this from the top, and let's just imagine I am a tenant and I want to acquire a plug-in solar system. So the first thing that comes to my mind is, will my landlord let me do it? Right? Do I need to permission? Is that can he refuse to say no? And usually, what has happened in the past is that landlords sometimes will say, "Oh, you're basically this is." I would rather not have you do that, please, because this is my flat, and I don't want to take over any risks or whatever, even though I might not know the risks. So, what has happened in Germany is that in I think it's 2023 or maybe 2024, plug-in PV has been added to the list of privileged construction measures. And this is not done in the renewable energy law, but in the, I put that on Google Translator, to be honest. It gave me Condominium Ownership Act. I don't know. This is supposed to be, I don't know if this is the right term, but it's the laws that define the obligations and rights of house owners, right? So the landlords. And this means that from that day on, landlords, so tenants really still need approval by their landlords before installing plug-in solar. But in fact, landlords cannot practically not refuse the installation in general. What they can say is that they can define how, or so for example, which color they would prefer, or which kind of mounting system, or they can also ask you to they can have certain wishes, but they cannot decide if you do it, right? And that is, I think, an important aspect that really, well, empowers tenants in this process. So now you're a tenant and you've called your landlord. You say, "Well, I know you can't refuse it. I know I'm allowed to do it. So do you have any wishes?" And he will say, "Well, yeah, please use the all black one because I think that fits better into the visual, into the looks of the balcony. But apart from that, just go ahead." So what you do then, you look up. So which kind of product should I buy, right? And then as I mentioned earlier last year, we now have a full safety, or like a full DIN standard that really describes safety standards, or defines safety standards for the entire product, right? Not only for the modules and the inverters, but really the whole product, and which makes it basically gives very clear guidelines and standards for retailers, for producers, for electricians, to only sell compliant and safe products out there, and also consumers have an easy way of checking whether those systems that they want to buy are also safe and compliant. So that's easy. So then I will go to the supermarket or to my local shop, and I will see that they have a few systems on sale, and I will check the price. And what I notice, oh, this is actually 0% VAT on. So why is that? And this is because in 2023 the German government has decided to put this 0% VAT on all PV related equipment, including the battery, including installation. This is also for rooftop installations, by the way, up until 30 kilowatts of peak power. And this is, of course, also an incentive, again, for me to invest in this technology. So, of course, I like that, right? I'm saving in Germany 19%. So I buy the product, and then I go home and I'm asking, well, how should I install this? Do I need an expert? And the answer is no, right? It is the installation is also by law allowed to do as a layman. Is that the right word, Dale? Layman, like a
Yeah, yeah,
non-professional, right? Exactly. So it's intentionally really designed in the way that it is as cheap and easy for me to install this myself as possible. So what I do, I fix the thing on my balcony and I put in the plug, and then I'm ready to go. And then I just need to do one thing. Within 1 month, I will have to register the plug-in solar system at a central register. So this doesn't mean I need to engage in any big discussions with my grid operator or anything like this. It's just a self-service online tool. It takes 15 minutes. I put in my name, my address, the amount of the power I've installed, and that's it. And then finally, since this is a grid-connected product, the grid operators actually are obliged, or they really have to check whether I need a new electricity meter. However, the responsibility for doing that is really 100% with the grid operator. So it's not my responsibility as a user to contact my grid operator and say, is this all, please come over, check my current meter or anything. The grid operators are responsible for replacing it, and they cannot forward the cost to me as a user. So that's their responsibility, and they carry the cost. And also, as a last, I think, which is also very practical and good policy making, there's an exception to say you are, even if your electricity meter is outdated, you can still operate your plug-in solar system from day one. So there's basically a transition time period in which you can just operate it even with your old meter, and then so you don't have to wait for your grid operator to replace the meter, which I think also again makes this whole process a lot easier. And I think so. This list again, I think there's maybe more things in the technical details that have been really taken also a long time and a lot of work. But I think what you can see here from the list that the policy design is really like using a lot of different little, let's say, screws, or how you say, ways of making this process as easy as possible. Okay, so that's it for that part. If you can move on, yeah. And now finally, maybe a few remarks on what can still, or no, not go wrong, but things to keep in mind rather. And here now we have the picture that I showed you from Esslingen in the beginning. So this is the full circle moment. So especially in these old and historic towns, there's of course the city administration is very sensitive towards the look of the city, and very quickly the question came up: do we want solar panels on historic buildings? Yes or no? And I think I don't want to, of course, I'm pro renewable energy, but I'm also pro beautiful city, right? So it's hard to take one side or the other, but I think what we have learned here, especially in Esslingen, is that considering the available solutions we have out there, right? We have black modules, but we also have colored modules. We have lightweight solutions that can, even when it's, not it's an old building and it's not so easy to fix it to a very stable balcony. There's solutions for that. So when you take a closer look, uh, it is actually, there's always ways to combine one with the other. So to keep your city beautiful and clean and safe, and still enable people to install these modules. And maybe, so my recommendation here is that the country state of Baden-Württemberg has then published, I think last year, or the date 2024, I think, guidelines for local municipalities on how they can define rules at the local level for implementing solar systems, even in these historic parts of towns. Okay, the second point, and now I'm speaking as a solar. Oh, sorry. I will keep it short. I know
No, 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 no.
I've spent my. I'm always finished. Um, the second part, and now I'm speaking again as a solar consultant, and I usually, yeah, my view is on not only on today, but on the next 15 years in which we in Baden-Württemberg want to become carbon neutral. So in 2040, we want to basically satisfy our whole energy demand from renewable energy sources only. And with that in mind, of course, then, and now I'm taking the systems perspective that I said before is not the only way of looking at things. But when you take this perspective, of course, what you don't want is that homeowners who actually have a big roof, is that they buy a plug-in solar system and think, okay, now I'm done with my energy transition at home, right? So I think, of course, one does not exclude the other, but I think um, when pushing plug-in solar, I think it is a good idea to also at the same time provide good tools and consultancy and information around the advantages and the possibilities you have with a big rooftop solar system that can really, power your electric vehicle or your heat pump or whatever electric device you want to acquire in the next years. And then my final point, and I think this is not well, it's kind of obvious, and as you can see from the picture here on the right, I want to end also with a positive message here. Um, um, I think balcony solar is really not only about money. It's not just about helping the climate. It's not about. It's not only about that, but it's also about really become a fun thing to do. And I think we cannot underestimate this, because imagine, waking up in the morning, you open the window, you look out into the sky and you see the sun coming out, and then the first thing you will do automatically almost is to take out your phone and to check how much your solar system is producing right now. And I think this is such an empowering thing to do. And when we talk to people, this is always what they love the most. And it's so whenever you want to tell the story and in your narrative around plug-in solar, don't forget this fun aspect, and because I think it's very powerful. Okay, so I think that was my last point, and thank you so much for listening, and I'm looking forward to hearing all your questions.
Yeah, fantastic. So we already had one question that was raised earlier, which is it was related to the image that you had concerning whether it's the renters or the owners that put the panels on. I think one of your slides suggested it's mostly the renters themselves, but
Mhm.
what's the conversation? What's the data, your experience suggesting whether it's predominantly renters, the owners of the houses, or the owners?
Yeah, good question. So I would Okay, so I think, of course, the short answer is, I mean, if you're an owner of a flat in a multi-house, multi-apartment building, you're just as much part of the target group as a tenant, right? But the really the critical thing is that in these multi-apartment buildings, what you can also do is basically to decide as the group of homeowners or flat owners to decide to invest in a large rooftop system, which then supplies all the small apartments underneath. But that in itself brings some challenges, and you need to agree in a group to invest, and some will like it and some will not, and there's a lot of discussion. So I think then this is a way for every individual, right, to really decide, I want to get started with this, I want to collect some experiences, and maybe on the more practical or no, not practical, more let's say from an insurance point of view, the one who installs the system is also the operator. So, which means that if the tenant, so the renter, installs the system, he or she is responsible for fixing it properly and for anything that has to do with the system. The landlord is not responsible, the owner. So I think in this way, this is also a way, you know, to protect the owners of the house, to say, well, I encourage my tenant to do it, and I also encourage them to do it themselves, but they are also responsible for doing it properly, right?
Great. Next question. Are there any government incentives for balcony solar systems in Germany? And what's the relationship, if any, with the feed-in tariff?
Yeah,
Or,
good.
or are the
Again,
systems just too small?
yeah, again, very good question. So I think so generally as an incentive, this 0% VAT is the main incentive on the investment side, I would say. There is also at the local level, some municipalities, they put up, let's say, bonuses for balcony solar. So you can basically hand in the bill to your local mayor, and he will, um, I don't know, give you back $100, basically, right? So as an easy, but not at the national level. So this is then local incentives that we see sometimes. And regarding the feed-in tariff, so technically these systems are grid connected. So technically or also legally, you have the right to receive also money for the excess energy that you put onto the grid. However, that would then require you to really have like a meter that needs to be installed, that can also, you know, measure the amount of electricity that you put on the grid, and then you would also need some other technical setup, which would then be, you know, this will add some costs to your balcony or your plug-in solar system, which usually, compared to what you gain from the small amounts of excess energy that you have, it doesn't pay off usually. So in practice, when you register your system in this central register, you can say, I um, how do you say? Uh, I don't need to be compensated. I don't need it, right? So you voluntarily basically say, um, I don't get the word right now. Well, how do you say, ich verzichte, Dale? What does that mean?
Renounce, do
Yeah,
without.
yeah, exactly. I voluntarily say, let's do it without, and then and that's the way that usually these balcony systems are operated. But from a legal perspective, you can, but then again, economically, it doesn't really make sense.
Um, There's a question. Can you explain again why there needs to be a new electrical meter and what is being updated?
Yeah, again, so again, since it is officially a grid connected electricity generation device, usually the grid operator needs to be able to measure the amount of electricity that is being fed onto the grid. And yeah, so that's a legal obligation usually, but the grid operator really needs to ensure this and also needs to then replace the meter accordingly.
There's a follow-up question. Can you explain the
Hmm.
variations on plug-in solar options being sold in Germany? You indicated there are different types and mentioned colors and lightweight solutions. Are there other varieties, mounting options?
Hmm.
Are the lightweight solutions less powerful or more expensive?
Yes, so the lightweight solutions are usually less powerful. Um, what mostly like so we particularly with the new product standard um, being published last year or went into effect last year, we can really categorize these systems in based on the size or the amount of power they provide. So we have an 800 watt power limit that is at the inverter, right? So the inverter can feed in a maximum of 800 watts to your local circuit, and which then, if you want to use the regular plug, you are able to use that together with up to 980 or 960 watts of module power. And the rationale behind it is that, depending on how you put the modules, they will hardly ever deliver the maximum peak power that is specified, right? So usually you will almost never have the full 800 watts of power being supplied from the inverter. But that is the legal definition there. And then, but there's also a legal option to still use the 800 watts inverter, but then install up to 2000 watts of module power. So what you can do is also use like 3 or 4 PV modules and arrange them in a way that they don't supply the electricity all at once, but in different times of the day, and still the maximum power will be limited to 800 watts. But in this case, you would then need, based on the newly published product standard, you would need so-called WLAN-Stecker. So it's an electrically more safe plug, which is then the rationale behind it is that with this increased module power, the continuous load that is going in through the plug is really higher, and it's continuously at a higher level, which then makes the plug and the cables age faster. But that's the main, I think, categorization, right? So you have the 800 watts with up to 900 watts of installed module power, and then the ones above. So and then there's different rules for those. Um, but apart from that, really, yeah, you can have colored modules. You can have, of course, different ways of fixing it, right? If you want to put it on a flat rooftop, you can have mounting systems that put them up like this, or you can also put them on a balcony like this, or increase the angle to maximize your energy output. All kinds of things, and also battery storage, of course. Yeah.
Um, in addition to the grid, when you say grid connected, is that because there's no backfeed prevention measures? A follow-up question too. Are the building codes similar in Germany to that which the US has? Regulations on plug receptacles, you just mentioned that the different types of designs that have been used to promote safety standards, breakers on branch circuits, unidirectionality of housing circuits, etc., that Germany has had to overcome. So it's linking those two questions.
Yeah, I want to make sure I get this question right. So the question is how we how we ensure safety based on this, island operating mode, or like so we prevent a backfeed of the system in case the grid goes down. Is that the question?
Yeah, Andrew, do you want to? I'll let you speak.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
Hey,
thank you.
yeah.
Yeah.
So like in the US, there's very specific building codes that are like pretty much it's barriers to plugins. So it's not as you said, this is like the inverter to the plug is what has to be regulated or codes and standards that become around. And in the US, we have a national code that defines breaker issues like breaker masking, like overloading a circuit, or they are unidirectional, so there isn't a bidirectionality plug, like just a normal plug in your house.
Mm.
And I don't know if Germany had that, or if that was never talked about, and there was like a gray
Yeah.
area you guys could just kind of quickly go through to get this to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the question. It's a very, I think, and I think you're touching a point that really took a couple of years to figure out in those technical standards. So what usually we have in house circuits, we have 16 ampere circuit breakers, and so at the 200 at the 200 so with the regular voltage of the grid, you would then have a maximum of I think 3,800 watts that you can have handle on those circuits as a and of course when this only measures the usually the electricity that is taken from the grid, and of course then when you add another source of energy that comes from the other end, then even though you don't cross this 16 ampere threshold on the circuit breaker, you can still have higher currents or higher power behind it, right? And I think this is where really these limits of those 800 watts that can come from the inverter are coming from, because these basically taking into account the amount of maximum power that you can really expect from coming from there. They will add a maximum of 3.5 ampere to those circuits, and this is the assumption that this is basically what the cables and the connectors can handle also over a longer period. Anything above that would be considered a safety risk, and this is why. So the way to handle this, long story short, is basically so this is considered in this 800 watt threshold by the microinverter.
great.
Mhm.
I want to circle back to Robert Francis, who asked a question earlier. I'm not sure, Magnus, if you'd be able to answer it because it's so uniquely domestic. But he says Utah's legislation authorizes balcony solar as long as it is listed and installed per the NEC. So how are they actually allowed since there is no UL standard to be listed against and none of the proposed NEC changes have been approved? I don't have an answer. I can't speak as an American, but I can write the question down and try to dig up something for you. Um, unless you'd like to ask it in a unique context, Robert.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, thank you. Perhaps you can rephrase that question again because I'm not sure I got it. Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand it myself, but I'll try. He writes, Utah's legislation authorizes balcony solar as long as it is, quote, listed and installed per the NEC. So how are they actually allowed since there is no UL standard, United Laboratories, to be listed against and none of the proposed NEC changes have been approved? I think what I could do is I could write down the question and then try to dig up an answer myself. Great.
Can
We'll
you
move
hear me
on.
if you need me to rephrase that?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, basically, when we saw that Utah had passed the legislation, it was basically enabling a legislation saying you're allowed to do it. So they wanted to recognize it, and we get that. But two of the key components to do it was it has to be listed equipment and it has to be installed in accordance with the National Electrical Code. Now, UL 3700, I believe, is being promulgated as we speak, but I don't think it's actually been formalized standard yet, but UL is working on that. But the one of the companies who took several code change proposals to the National Electrical to the NFPA NEC panel for code changes, although all their proposals were turned down. At least now they have some idea of what they need to do to address. But theoretically, the two conditions that you need to meet in order to allow them to be installed in Utah don't exist in reality. But I know full well that I think we're up to like 29 states now that have some sort of legislation on the books or coming to recognize balcony solar, but yet they don't. So I know it's happening. So I'm just kind of curious, how is it happening when those two kind of conditions aren't actually being met yet?
Yeah. So I think I don't think I can answer this adequately for your situation in the US, but I think this touches upon what I've tried to explain based on this, the history of how this has been enabled in German legislation. And we've, for a very, very, very long time, have been operating and using these kinds of systems, even though the technical standard definition was still in progress. So I think perhaps, of course, these technical standards, they create clarity for retailers and for users and for everyone on what is considered safe and what is not. But even though something is not standardized, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is legally forbidden, And I think perhaps, I don't know if this answers your question, but I think if anything, I would, based on our experience in Germany, perhaps you can find some, I don't want to say find peace, but find some calm. Maybe this can. I think this is what we've done for almost 10 years, and still it went okay, right? So perhaps just let it happen. Don't stop the momentum, even if the technical standard definition takes a while. I think it's important to, Does that answer the question, or maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. And the technologies are always advancing, and yes, there are ways that the codes have to catch up sometimes. I absolutely get that. So thank you. Yes, definitely answered.
Great. So with the last 90 seconds left, I'm going to merge two questions into one. Do you see any technical issues, Magnus, with implementing plug-in solar for 120-volt outlets? And this final is there any data in Germany on how long users are keeping their plug-in photovoltaic units before replacing them?
Sorry, can you say this, the
So
second
the
part
first
again?
question was, are there any technical
120
issues
volts?
with implementing plug-in solar with 120-volt outlets?
Mm.
And then the last one was, is there any data in Germany on how long users of the panels are keeping their plug-in photovoltaic units before replacing them? How long do they last?
Yeah, so they last longer than we thought. Always, they keep surprising us. So the first part of the question, I would have to say I would have to consult with my photovoltaic network. But I think I could also give you an answer on that. But from right now, from the top of my head, I can't really think of any technical, or I don't feel confident in answering that. The second part is that the degradation of these modules, at least, has always been slower than we thought. They last so much longer. I think from a technical perspective, as long as you regularly check whether they are fixed properly onto the wall or to the balcony, I think this is really where we always advise people to not save money, on some flimsy plastic construction or cable binders or whatever. Don't do that. Use proper equipment there. And then from an electrical perspective, of course, then don't put the inverter right into the sun so that it put it behind the module. So there's a few things that you can really make sure so that the system really lives long, and you reduce the aging effects that can happen. Also cables, make sure they are proper cables and don't put them into the direct sun if you can. So these things prolong the lifetime But other than that, I think most of the systems that have been installed are still up and running, and we rather say they would last at least 20 years, rather 30.
Wow. That brings us to our conclusion. I just want to say thank you so much, Magnus, for taking time in Germany to share with us what you've done. It's amazing. I just want to thank everybody that participated in the webinar for their time. These are regular programs that NVRC does, and we look forward to doing some more. And I really would like to maybe do something related to plug-in solar at the end of the year, because the level of questioning and the interest is just so high. And what's super exciting was that I was reading that I think alone in Virginia, there's 3 proposed pieces of legislation supporting balcony solar in the current before the legislature that's being discussed. So it'd be fun to see how far we progress between March of this year and December. So I'd love to bring you back, Magnus, and talk about this further if you don't mind.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure. And I'm happy to send over some more good news, hopefully, on
Great.
solar any other day.
Great. Thank you, everybody. This webinar also will be posted to the NVRC homepage along with the slide deck. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you.